Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Happy Head podcast. My name is Paul and I'm your host. Today I'm joined by Eman. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I am very well. Just before we went live, I just said that to Eman that I had a bit of an emergency. These are, or they were, I thought, very expensive headphones by Steinhauser. And I can't remember which one it was. This one just it's made of plastic, the connector between the kind of this bit and the overhead bit, and it's just snapped. So thankfully, I'm a firm believer in gaffer tape. So I've just spent 2 minutes desperately trying to get this thing on because I have got other headphones, but these are kind of the best set for this setup. That there we go. So Emma, you're near Chicago, am I right?
I'm in London, Ontario, Canada.
Oh God, why the hell am I thinking? That's what I mean. They're not even close. Ontario,
We're all
Canada is up
6
here.
hours away if you wanna.
I mean, like, if you look on the map, yeah, Ontario is kind of up here and Chicago's down here. I mean, they kind
Yeah,
of got the Great Lakes as a kind of a connection, but it's still a long way
yeah,
away. I've got no
yeah.
idea where that came from. It's just the way my mind works sometimes.
It's probably because I want to go to Chicago. Maybe that's how you picked up with the energy.
Ah, that's it. Yeah, I'm picking up the psychic energy, you know,
Yeah.
through the waves of Zoom. I'm just collecting it all up. Anyway, so Emma, what we're going to talk about today? What should we talk about?
Well, whatever you want to talk about. I just wanted to talk about my experience as a person who had lived in a very different closed maybe environment when I was little, and then how that affected me, and kind of when I traveled to different places, every time I would travel things would change, or the way I view the world would change. And then definitely how I got married, and then throughout my marriage it was not a good marriage, and how that also had changed. It just it just how every time people go through things, and then you learn new perspectives about life, and then how that changes the way you view everything around you.
Gotcha. So, right at the very start of that, you said that you were kind of brought up in a very closed environment. Can you define what you mean by closed and what that looked like?
Yeah, so I was born in Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia back then was very like closed and very like um strict, and that kind of really identified my first 10 years, I guess, of how I viewed things, because I was not really aware of the outside world, if that would make sense.
Hmm.
So I only really kind of viewed it from the perspective of what I was taught from school and what I was learning from home. And there was a lot of things that women can't do. And it's because you're a girl. It's like, well, no, this is not possible. You can't do this. You're a girl. And it was very, 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 very disappointing now. Obviously, when you look back at it, it's like I hadn't had the chances to do so many things that other girls would have done that age. Like the simplest thing would be just picking up a sport and actually playing that sport, for example. Um, and a funny story I always tell people is that I wasn't allowed to play with Barbie when I was little, because it was believed that Barbie was evil. So just simple things like that really kind of made me think that just for being a girl, there was something wrong with me just because I'm a girl, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. I've got a question though. When you say that you weren't allowed to do certain things like take up a sport as an example, now as an adult we can see that we weren't allowed. But when you were a child, did you know you were missing out? Do you get what I'm saying? That when you were like 8 or 9, did you know that there were things out there in the world that other people could do, but you weren't allowed to do?
No, no, because I didn't even know that girls had the chance to actually go and play this sports, for example.
Right.
So
So sorry to interrupt you. When did you become aware that you'd missed out on this whole kind of different growing up?
so we immigrated to Canada after that, and then all of a sudden I saw a completely different world, and I saw that there's activities and there's sports and there's other things, and it was safe for me to walk from my house to school, which was very a weird concept to me because in Saudi Arabia you can't go outside of the house without a man, right? And if you do, it's very dangerous because it's just not it's not, or back then, I don't know how it is right now, but back then, it's like you don't leave the house, you have to have a man with you. So just the concept of me walking from my house to the school by myself, that was a big one for me. And then I went to the school and then I saw that people are playing basketball or playing volleyball, they're playing all those things. I was like, oh, wait a minute, that's something that I can actually do here. And then I actually signed up for a few sports and I started kind of, you know, playing just for fun. Like I didn't take it for further than that. But it was just like just the way, like even when I was at school at the beginning, the first couple of days, I wouldn't talk to anyone. I didn't know English that well, and I was just really shy. I was not used to talking to guys around me. So one of my classmates, a guy, actually kind of he called out my name while we were in the hallway, and I looked at him, and then he started imitating the way I was walking, and then he pretended like he had a folder like I did, and that he's looking down on the floor and walking, and that kind of opened up something in me. I'm like, oh my god, why am I walking like this with my head down? Why am I um, giving out that image about myself?
So when you moved to Canada with your family, did they allow you to explore this great new world, or were they still quite strict on how you should behave?
No, obviously they also changed a lot. So the same way I changed, they also changed.
Uh-huh.
Definitely there were still a few things that from a family perspective, it still is like culture and whatever, but it wasn't that big of a deal because I was already busy exploring the other things that I was allowed to explore, that I wasn't thinking about other things.
Okay. And then you said kind of that this theme of being closed off from things carried on throughout your life to a certain point.
Yeah, so it's like I've been when we are raised in this closed environment and closed culture, you start thinking or adopting a certain way. And for example, I had, I had, after a few years, we went to Egypt. We lived in Egypt for a while. And when I was in Egypt, for example, a teacher of mine was saying, "Oh, if a lady gets a divorce, it's because it's her fault. It's always the woman's fault because the woman is the one who's supposed to take care of the house, and if she doesn't, and a divorce happens, it means that she did something wrong." And I actually believed her. Like I actually thought this was true, and I viewed the world that way. So when I got married a few years later, I thought it was my responsibility to keep everything intact and that I had to really save my marriage and not get a divorce. Even if I'm unhappy, even if it was a mentally abusive relationship, even if it was whatever it was my role as a woman to just keep things going. And
So,
that's what I mean from that perspective, is that I really had all these, a woman has to be very obedient to her husband and very do this and do that, and all these ideas were just really engraved in me heavily. And therefore, when I was married, it just destroyed me completely.
How did you, or how were you able to recover and to kind of set yourself free from all of those beliefs that you kind of picked up over the years?
So when I got married, we moved to Europe. So we lived in Europe for 2 years. And luckily there I had amazing friends that were that kind of took me in, and they saw that there were that things were not right. Like I would go to them, I would be always looking at my phone, making sure that I'm not late. Or, I wouldn't be, it's just, I would not be sitting down comfortably. And one time, one of them told me, um, do you think this is what marriage is? Do you think that a woman should always be living in worry and anxiety and scared of, like, you know, doing whatever she wants to do? And that kind of struck me, and I was like, what do you mean? And she said, well, I was just want I don't know if that's true or not, but some people manipulate others. So I was very, very aware of physical abuse. I didn't understand what mental abuse was.
Hmm.
And then when she was talking about manipulation, I was like, how does that work? And then she explained it to me. It's like when you talk to someone, they make you feel guilty. It's like every time it's like, no, it's you. You're the problem, not them. So all what she said, and she wasn't saying that your husband is like this. She said, just see if he is like this or not. And that day I went home and I started actually looking at it from the perspective she gave me. And I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what he's doing. And that kind of when my mind started changing. And I started looking at it from a perspective of, well, why did I have all these ideas about that? It's my responsibility. I have to do this. I have to do that. Um, and then it just kind of started evolving after that, especially after I got divorced and I started working on myself and my self development. That's when things shifted for me dramatically, and I kind of left all those ideas that I was raised with and I broke free of it.
Divorce is difficult for everyone at any time of life. But coming from kind of your cultural background, did you experience it as being harder, more difficult to go through that entire process and come out still sane at the other end?
Yeah, it definitely was not an easy process. I'm very lucky that I had very supportive parents. Unfortunately, not many women in my situation have that. So for me, at least my parents and my whole family were with me. They all saw that this was not a good marriage. After I had told them the things that had happened, um, and I had and I'm a single mom, right? I even had my daughter with me, so that it was even harder. Like sometimes the parents, not sometimes, a lot of the times the parents be like, "Well, you can't get a divorce. You have a child. Who's going to take care of the child?" So luckily, I had a very strong family support. Obviously, people around me were like, "Well, give him another chance. Try to do this. You're really going to ruin your life if you get a divorce." Like I was hearing all of those comments, but luckily for me as well, I had gone to see a therapist, and she was telling me, you can't, because I was telling her, people are telling me that I'm destroying my home. And she said, you can't have a home with a broken foundation. The foundation is not there. How are you, so the house is not there. It's imaginary. So for me, that also really resonated with me. And I started telling people that I'm like, there really isn't a home. You guys don't understand.
Yeah, that's a good illustration that the house is unsafe if the foundations aren't stable. I've
Mhm.
got a friend who owns a house out in Greece, and they've not been able to live in there for several years because there was an earthquake, and to fix the foundations basically means kind of like knocking the house down and starting again, which is incredibly expensive. So it's just sitting there unsafe and unused. So yeah, I completely agree. Excuse me, that if things aren't good in the relationship, then there isn't a relationship as such.
Exactly.
So how did you kind of take all of those experiences that you've been through in your life and kind of bring them out into the work that you do now?
That's a very good question. So now, having worked on myself for over like 10 years and started developing myself, I recently become a life coach. And that has really helped me kind of understand a lot of the pain and issues that people come with. Whether it's especially for youth that have parents that don't really understand, like there's a big gap between the parents and the youth, and it's like they have a different type of thinking than their parents. It's like, how do you bridge that gap? So I've been working with a lot of Muslim youth lately, on working on bridging that gap and trying to have the youth understand our parents. They don't hate us, but they just have a different mentality of thinking. How do we, as the youth, well, them as the youth, me now, not so much, but anyways, how do you, as the youth, can change your perspective on how you're looking at your parents in order to kind of better your communication with your parents and kind of try, because at the end you can't really change your parents, but you can change the way you communicate with them and the way you can kind of explain to them how they might disappoint you in some things, or you thought they would do this and not that. So instead of you going to attack your parents, how can you talk to your parents with with compassion and understanding that they really don't want, like they really want what's best for you, but it might just be coming out in the wrong way.
Yeah, I completely agree. You use two words there, sort of compassion, understanding, because even between parents and children that were in the same community, in the same country, you have those generational differences. But I
Yeah.
can't imagine coming from, say, the Middle East to Canada or the States or the UK, where the parents are of a certain age and they've lived their entire lives in one style, shall we say. The kids grow up in a completely different environment, have a completely understanding of how the world goes around. So you've
Yeah.
got, not only have you got the generational differences, you've got the cultural differences, because even though they may be Muslim, as an example, they've grown up in a multicultural society, or they are growing up in a multicultural society, and parents have kind of like transplanted themselves. Their
Mhm.
culture still kind of fills them. Yeah. So yeah, that must be a hell of a challenge to kind of cross that divide without causing lots of friction and difficulties.
Exactly, because that was one of my issues, is that I don't want parents to think that I'm making their children rebel against them, but at the same time, it's like there has to be a change. So I started working with the youth, but then I do have plans that I want to start to work with the parents themselves in order to kind of also try to give them that insight of, yes, you're living in a different environment, things are different. What you think is culturally, you know, your kid has to be an A student. Well, why does your kid really need to get A's? Where do we in our life distinguish the A's from the B's after they graduate from university? Like what's the difference? That was a big, like for me, that was a big shock after I graduated, and I was like, the person who got C's or D's barely passed are having the same job as I do. So why were we so focused on getting those A's and those high marks, just so that at the end we end up all together? I actually was asking some of the boys a couple of weeks ago about that. If if you ever fail a course, what would happen? And the boys flipped. They were like, "Oh my God, my parents would kill me. They would not let me, probably play video games for like a month or something." And it's like, well, why though? Why do we need to get those really, really, really high marks? So it's about challenging all their views, and it's just talking to the parents of, well, why do you need me to get this? What is it going to satisfy? What is it going to do? So it really is about just changing the way we talk and communicate with each other, which is not
What's
easy.
what's the most difficult aspect of the work that you do when it comes to getting the youth to be more compassionate and understanding with their parents? Are there any particular subjects or areas that are more challenging than others?
Uh, Definitely, yes. It's about how open they can be towards their kids to not be, how can I say that, having control. When the problem is our parents, and me as a parent, I tried to control my daughter. I did the same mistake, but then when I understood that, wait a minute, my kids are not like, yes, she's my kid, but she's not my property. Like, it's not about controlling the kid, it's about educating the kid, guiding my kid, and then letting them choose their own choices with me being there, obviously. And at each age it's different. Like, I'm not going to let a 3-year old just run in the street and be like, yeah, there you go, he chose to run in the street. But I mean, obviously it depends on their age and how well they're aware of their surroundings, of, okay, eventually they're going to start choosing their own decisions, and if I always make their decisions for them, that's not gonna really serve them in the future. So then when 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 the boy or the girl would come and talk to me, well, my parent is always like, my mom is always busy, she's always, tired, whatever, and I want to talk to her about something, and she's never really having the time to talk to me about it. And then it's about trying to explain to the girl, well, why is your mom tired? Your mom is tired because she's probably overburned. She's having too much responsibility, but she's not having enough self care. And then just explaining that whole side of, why is your parent not trying? I mean, your parent is acting that way, is very challenging, because I don't think kids really understand that. But then when you try to explain it to them, they're like, oh, I never thought about it that way. And there was a specific girl that I was working with, and she was like, I feel like I almost hate my mom. And I was like, why do you think that way? And she said, because she's always yelling at us. She's always busy. She doesn't have time for anything. She doesn't even do this and do that and do this. And she was like, complaining about everything. So when I had asked her, tell me, what is your mom's story? And then she explained to me, well, her whole parents' marriage was like not what her mom chose. Like, she was kind of forced into it. And then having been forced into a marriage, and not living the same way you're living with your parents, because her husband did not have the means that her dad did, for example. So she had to lower her standards, or the way she, so I told her I had to explain all of that to her. And then when I did, and she's like, oh, that must have been really hard. I said, probably. Imagine if you were in her shoes, what would you do? So I feel like just trying to explain that part of why our parents are so angry all the time, or so tired, is the hardest and most important thing to do. Because when you kind of explain that to the kid, yeah, they might not get it from the first time, but the more I say it and the more they listen, the more then they go like, oh, okay, I didn't understand that. So it's, yeah, it's
Do
very
you get
challenging.
kids that completely reject what you're saying to them?
Um, so far, no. I get kids that resist it, and they just can't get themselves to they can't get themselves to understand what's happening because of how angry they are, because they think that their parents are just taking everything away from them. So definitely just taking that one step at a time instead of like full on like, oh no, you're being ungrateful or whatever. No, it's just taking it, like breaking that into little steps. That's what's been helpful to me. And for the kids to kind of communicate and understand.
So, do you work with kids in groups or on a one-to-one basis or a mixture?
I work with kids in groups. I work with 12 and like 12 and above. And yeah, and then now I'm planning to also work with parents in the near future, where because a lot of the kids have been telling me, can you talk to our parents, can you explain this to them, can you do this? So so now that they've been telling me this, now I'm looking at actually also working with the parents as well.
And how do you find clients? Because obviously kids don't have money, generally speaking. So do you go into schools, contact schools, or do the parents contact you and say, I've got a problem with a kid? How does it actually work? How do you actually find your clientele?
So for now I've been doing it for a really low price, and it's like the parents, I've I've kind of made it into a mindfulness group. So I'm calling it yeah, the mindfulness group. So the parents, when they hear about it from like the mosque or the community, they would actually register their kids in it, and it's for a very small fee, because right now I'm not looking at the fee, I'm looking at the purpose, of how I want to actually, of my end goal of what I want to achieve.
And what is your end goal?
My end goal is to really bridge that communication gap between the kids and their parents, and build better, stronger communities, because with stronger communities, we spread love, we spread acceptance, we spread awareness, and that's what really matters. Instead of me looking at others, oh, they're different from me, oh no, they're not the same, they're not from the same background, or they're not from the same religion, oh no, I can't do this because this person is that. I really, really want us to look beyond our differences and just have love and compassion towards everyone around us.
So, Emma, how's the best way for people to get hold of you? Where can they reach you?
It's either on Instagram or on my website. So my Instagram is self.discovery.journey, and my website is www.selfdiscoveryjourney.ca.
Okay, don't worry about writing those down. I'll put the links in the show notes. Listen, it's been great chatting with you today. Do you have any kind of final thoughts or final words that you'd like to share?
I would just really love it, thank you so much for allowing me to come and speak and share what I'm doing. And like I said, I'm a big advocate for love. And like I said, with love we build stronger communities, and with hate, unfortunately, we tear each other apart. And I just really hope that we can spread the love and joy and just accept each other for who we are without trying to change anything.
Yeah, the Beatles said it back in the 60s. All you need is love. Listen,
Yeah.
Iman, it's been brilliant chatting with you today. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. I know it's very early down where you are. Thank you for watching, folks, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Happy Head podcast. Bye now.